In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a pretty standard demo of Cloud Access Manager 8.1. We're not going to be talking about all the different features, and that's because we have a lot of other videos that you can take a look at if you want to deep dive into another topic. But this is a nice video to get an idea of what the product's about, how it's used, and basically give you some experience with how it looks and feels. So to begin, we normally take a look at the high-level features you're going to find in Cloud Access Manager. Now, we often say that Cloud Access Manager isn't a single sign-on solution. And that's only because we call it a web access management solution. There's a lot more involved in a web access management tool than there is in something as small or as simple as a single sign-on utility. Now, with that said, one of the things that we do very, very well is single sign-on. That's actually, of course, why a lot of people come and take a look at this product. What makes us unique, though, is that we will do single sign-on to any web application security model. We're going to see that in this demo. So whether you're doing header injection, basic authentication, Windows authentication, form fill, federation like SAML, WS Federation, OAuth, OpenID Connect, we basically have you covered. The next thing we're going to take a look at in the demo is the notion of multi-factor security. And of course, we're going to work with our own superior product, Defender, but we're also going to work with any solution that supports the standard Radius interface. Okay, now not only can we step up to a Radius server or do multi-factor authentication with a Radius server, but we also work with smart cards. And that includes X509 certificates, right? So if you have an X509 certificate deployed to a user's machine, we can actually use that as an additional method of authentication. Now, one of the things about this approach, when we're talking about multi-factor authentication, is that the default configuration for Cloud Access Manager is to essentially hard code multi-factor choices. So we could say, for instance, everyone that's connecting to the system is going to get a multi-factor challenge. Or we could say only external users are going to get multi-factor. Or we could even say it's by application. So I'm going to let you authenticate, but depending on which application you're going to access, maybe I'll step you up to a multi-factor challenge. But the simple fact is that's a hard-coded decision that you're making. You're basically going into the application decision and saying, I'm going to hard-code this to make this decision. And every time that user hits that particular application, they're going to get prompted with multi-factor challenge. And that's kind of something we don't think we need to do anymore. So we introduced adaptive authentication inside Cloud Access Manager. This is an out-of-the-box feature. You can use it if you want. And really what we've done is we've created a risk engine. We refer to it as the Security Analytics Engine. We make essentially real-time adaptive multi-factor decisions that say, you know what, I see that your connection is a trusted connection. It's one I've seen before. I know who you are. This is a known IP address. Geographically, I see where you are in the country, and that's where you were last time, etc. There's a number of risk factors that are going to be lowered. Now we're going to take a look at another slide before we get into the demo that breaks down the risk engine capabilities. However, if you want more information about that, please go take a look at the risk engine video. It's a deep dive on that particular topic where we actually get into defining a policy and seeing how those policies change the interaction with the user. The next feature we want to talk about is the notion of provisioning. Cloud Access Manager offers something that we call just-in-time provisioning. So the provisioning model inside Cloud Access Manager is something we call just-in-time provisioning. Let me tell you what that means. Imagine you're connecting your users to Salesforce. And Salesforce is going to call you and they're going to say, all right, we're going to help you set up your users. We need to provision these users to Salesforce before they can access the site. So what they're going to ask you to do is essentially say, let's take all of your sales and marketing Active Directory groups or however you define what those users are, and we're going to synchronize those to Salesforce. Now that could be, who knows, 1,000, 2,000 people that are being synchronized with Salesforce. In reality, maybe only 500 or 1,500 of those are actually using the Salesforce target. So we're paying for more licenses there than are actually being used. The other thing is we have to maintain a synchronization engine. So there's a point of failure there that we wish we didn't have, and there's a number of licenses that are provisioned unnecessarily. So our approach is a little bit different. We'll create a security policy, and the policy will basically say, here are the people that are allowed to have a Salesforce account. And then it's basically a user self-service function. Go into the application catalog, we'll see this in the demo, select the application you want to have provisioned, and it will provision you in real time. So we will go and get the information we need to provision you, your first name, your last name, your email, etc. and we'll send all that information up to Salesforce in real time. So in the long run, what you end up with are the people that have access to Salesforce are the people that are using Salesforce. We're not unnecessarily provisioning a lot of people to Salesforce that don't need to be provisioned, and we don't need to make sure that our synchronization engine is up and running and maintained, etc. Now this is a fairly lightweight provisioning engine, right? There's not a lot of power and flexibility in saying something like, hey, when someone requests access to Salesforce, I need it to go to this manager, and he's going to click on an email that approves that, and then it's going to get forwarded to this person, etc. Right? The notion of a workflow, the notion of a more complicated enterprise scale provisioning engine is something that's more associated with an identity and access management tool. All right, and so if you want to talk about a more robust version of provisioning, then you're going to want to talk to us about Identity Manager. But for a lot of customers that say, look, this is exactly satisfying what I need to do. I need to make sure people get provisioned to Salesforce or Google Apps or Office 365, whatever that target is. I need to make sure these people get provisioned, and I want them just to be able to click a button and have the provisioning happen in real time. Then this is the provisioning engine for you. I will say, though, that if you look at the second bullet point here, we do also support a manual provisioning workflow for any application. This is where you may have an application in your environment or an application on the cloud that Cloud Access Manager doesn't know how to automatically provision to. What you can do, though, is specify a user in your environment that's an administrator. And we will basically expose that icon on the application catalog. A user can come in and say, I want access to this application, and it will generate an email to the owner. It's not necessarily an approval workflow. It is in some respects. But basically the goal is so that the application owner receives an email notifying them that a user is asking for access. They can go and provision that account manually, and when they're done, they click a hyperlink in the email, and that basically tells the user, you have the application access you need. You can go access it via the portal. So again, the goal here is just simply to say, if there's a target that Cloud Access Manager can't automatically provision to, at least we can generate an email to the owner. And again, if you want to talk about more complicated provisioning capabilities or the ability to literally provision to just about anything, that again is something that you want to look at an identity management system for. Okay, and that's Identity Manager. So the last thing that we're going to cover on this slide is the notion of reverse proxy. And this is actually a really important and critical feature that we're going to give you in Cloud Access Manager. And so let's just take a look at the first bullet point. Internet access to intranet applications without VPN. Now let me say first off that VPN technology is absolutely essential. It's needed for us to get our jobs done. But there are times when VPN technology is unavailable, and there are other times when it's completely inappropriate. So when is it unavailable? Imagine being at a public library and someone sends you a text message and says, we need you to log into the HR system right away and update a user's record or approve a payroll exemption. Who knows what the use case may be? The simple fact is that site is behind your company's firewall and you're currently at the public library. So you're definitely not going to go onto a public library computer and install your VPN client. That would be a disaster. Not only that, you probably couldn't, right? That machine's going to be locked down. Well, with Cloud Access Manager, you basically connect to a secure portal that's sitting in your DMZ. I'm going to authenticate you against your directory. I will step up your authentication to multi-factor if I have to or if I need to. And then I will go behind the firewall and get that web content and stream it to you at the library or your mobile phone or your computer at home, etc. So again, basically the notion is if you need access to an internal system with your mobile phone, how are you going to do that without VPN, right? And that's where Cloud Access Manager steps in. We will go get that web content for you and stream it to you securely. Take a look at this last bullet point here. Fantastic solution to provide partners access. Imagine today the scenario that's actually very common, and I'm chuckling because it's just interesting how common it is, of saying there's a partner organization or a number of partners that need to get access to an internal website, and the way that I'm going to provide that access is through VPN technology. This is a massive security risk, a huge security risk on many, many levels, right? So we can remove that risk and say, look, partner A, partner B, just simply access our portal. Our portal is actually capable of routing them back to their home realm, right? So they can log in against their own directory. That's another thing that we can talk about in another video. But basically the notion here is that when that partner needs access to a site, they are not in my network. They're visiting a web page. I'm authenticating them. I'm challenging them for multi-factor credentials if I need to, and then I will go get the content they need and hand it to them. I don't need to let them through the castle walls. to get the information that they need. So this is a really important thing to consider if you have partners that are accessing content or web pages today through VPN. So we're going to take a look at one more slide. And again, this is the slide that's talking about the Security Analytics Engine. It's something that I think is appropriate to discuss in a little bit more detail here. However, if you want to deep dive on that, please go take a look at the Security Analytics Engine video. All right, so let's get that next slide up. So the Security Analytics Engine is based on a number of plugins. And first and foremost is the Blacklist Provider. This is the one we should all be doing, but we don't know how to do it. Essentially, there are lists all over the internet that you can download, lists of known threats on the internet. And our Blacklist Provider is going to say, if you're trying to connect to me through one of these threats, I'm either going to step you up and challenge you or simply block the connection altogether. And of course, if you want to get probably the best blacklist in the market, you can subscribe to the Dell SecureWorks blacklist, and that's going to integrate directly into this solution too. One of the interesting use cases you can do with the Blacklist Provider, though, is to actually have a gray list that you create on your own. Let me give you more detail about this scenario. Imagine in a university setting where we definitely want to block out computers that are known threats, right? Well, there might also be a collection of computers in the quad or in the student union that students are constantly walking up to, logging in, etc. We might want to create a special list just for those computers and say this is a gray list. And anytime someone connects from one of these computers, we're going to always multi-factor challenge them. All right, so I'm going to send a text message to their phone or here's your code for accessing, etc. Why? Well, because very often there's an ATM right next to the kiosk and someone's looking at the password the person typed in, right? So we want to make sure that we're always multi-factor challenging people at a public kiosk like that. You can configure that however you want. The next plugin we're going to talk about is one based upon behavior trends. And this is what I like to call a forensic thumbprint about every user that accesses the environment. So what do we know about a user? We know the IP address, we know geographically where they are, we know the browser they're using, the applications they're trying to access, etc. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to build a profile, an individual profile about every user that attaches to the system. And as long as you maintain that thumbprint, as long as your thumbprint doesn't change, then you're now considered a low risk. So for instance, the first time you may connect from your home, I may see a bunch of new things that I've never seen before. And so I'm going to say, hey, your risk is a little bit high here, so I'm going to prompt you for multi-factor. But when you connect again, 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later, from the same place, the same IP, the same browser, trying to access the same application, etc., your risk is low enough now where I don't need to challenge you for multi-factor. Now, pick your laptop up, go down the street to the coffee shop, a number of different things have changed, right? Your physical location has changed, your IP address has changed, and now there might be enough additive flags that create you a higher risk than normal. And so again, I'm going to simply prompt you for multi-factor. Hey, something different about you. But guess what? Now I have a profile for you at the coffee shop too. So you can go back and forth to the coffee shop, and I'm going to know, okay, for John Doe, this is an acceptable scenario. The next plugin we're going to talk about is geolocation. One of the things I'm not mentioning on this slide is the fact that we can block any country by default, okay, simply based upon IP address. This plugin is a bit different. This one actually looks at the physical location of the user connecting and compares it to the location where they connected last. So for instance, if you connected from Mission Viejo, California, and a half an hour later you connected from Irvine, California, that's just fine, right? That's a reasonable amount of time it would take for you to travel from Mission Viejo to Irvine. Now meanwhile, if you connected from Mission Viejo 5 minutes ago, and now you're connecting from Beijing, China, that's a huge risk. That is not you, right? So there is a calculation that's being executed that says, is it a reasonable amount of time for you to travel from one location to another? And is that time something that I need to be concerned about, right? And so again, if it's a reasonable amount of time, the risk is relatively low. If you've traveled a long distance in an unreasonably short amount of time, that's a big risk to me, and we're going to handle that appropriately. Malware detection. If you have a SonicWall, you're familiar with its capability to do deep packet inspection and its ability to capture threats on the wire. So what SonicWall can do is it will look at the traffic, it'll look at literally at the signature of the bytes traveling through the network, and it can say, hey, this computer has this adware, this spyware, this malware, etc. Or this computer is being used in a constant battery of intrusions, right, that we're detecting. And so it will send that information to my risk engine. So this is different than the blacklist in that the blacklist are known threats. SonicWall is going to capture threats as they happen. So when it sends this information to me and then you go try to connect to the HR website, I'm going to look at that plugin and SonicWall is going to say, hey, wait a second. This guy's got this adware or this spyware. Now you may be thinking, well, who cares if you've got adware or spyware on your machine? Is that really a threat to be connecting to the HR system? Absolutely it is. Spyware and adware is often a Trojan horse, right? And residing inside is a computer that's being controlled by someone else, right? So it may not even be the human being you think it is trying to connect. It could be the adware that's trying to connect. So two things are going to happen now. You can go into my log file and it will show you, hey, here's this user connecting. Here's the spyware that they have. So I can now be proactive and get to that user's computer and try to remove that spyware. But the other thing is that I can actually have that person on the phone and I can say, okay, this is you actually trying to connect. And they're like, yeah, I'm trying to get to the system, whatever. And I can produce an override for them. So I'm still going to let you through, even though I'm going to be blocking you initially. If you call up the help desk and you say, look, I'm being blocked, I don't have access, I don't know why. Again, two things. I can tell you, here's why. You have this malware signature. And let me go ahead and create a half-an-hour window for you to get your job done. We're going to send somebody down to clean up your computer. Now the notion of custom plugins is an important one. We haven't exposed the SDK for custom plugins yet. It has been written to support that notion, but we're basically working on trying to define how are we going to allow folks to write a custom plugin in a way that doesn't cripple the performance of the system, right? So we're looking for a way to sandbox correctly the plugins that are written by customers. But let me tell you what this capability is going to do once we release the SDK. If you're in a financial industry, there's no existing plugin that, for instance, measures the stock market and says, if the stock market fluctuates more than 500 points, I want to raise the risk across the board, right? Conversely, if you're in the military and you're saying, if I'm DEFCON 1, that's great. If I'm DEFCON 3, that's a huge problem and I need to raise risk, I don't have a plugin for that. So if an individual business can create their own plugin and incorporate it, now we have an ability to basically tailor our risk engine to your business needs. All the risk engine is going to do is simply report back to Cloud Access Manager how high of a risk you are, and then Cloud Access Manager is going to respond to that accordingly. So again, if you want more information about this, you want to see a demo of this, go take a look at the Security Analytics Engine demo video, and you're going to see what you need. With that said, let's get into a demo in this environment. Let's see Cloud Access Manager in action.